The Daily Derech. We are walking the path of holiness.
Hello, everybody. This is Rabbi Marcus Rubenstein. Welcome to the Daily Derech, a special project of exploring Judaism, the United Synagogue of Conservative Judaism, and the Rabbinical Assembly. Today is the first day after Shabbat Kodesh, the 18th of Nisan, 5786, corresponding to the secular calendar to Sunday, April 5th, 2026. We will read Parashat Shemini this coming Shabbat, and it is the first day of Chol Hamoed Pesach, at least in the Galut, in exile, and the third day of the Omer. Let's begin. All right, Me'am Loez on the Parashat Shemini. Now we really are in the week of Shemini. We're also in the week of Chol Hamoed Pesach, of course. And we're going to continue talking about the Parsha we will read after Pesach is over, the Shabbat Parashat Shemini. And again, Shemini means the eighth day after Moses and Aaron and his children and everybody were setting up the Tabernacle. And finally, on the eighth day, they inaugurated the Tabernacle. We spoke about in recent episodes the idea that maybe Moses originally was supposed to be Kohen Gadol, but then that job was taken away from him, surprisingly, on the eighth day and given to Aaron. And you have to wonder, how did Moses sort of recover from this and how to internalize this? And the Me'am Loez speaks about this so beautifully of how Moses dealt with losing this position. Of course, you could tell that he was frustrated, according to the Me'am Loez, that it was upset, and obviously it was a punishment that was felt as a negative. But we see that Moses recovers relatively quickly. And so how does Moses sort of do this, and how does Moses contextualize this? Well, we know that actually the situation was opposite just a little bit ago. Who was told to go and rescue the Jewish people from Egypt? It was Moses. It wasn't Aaron. It easily could have been Aaron. Aaron was the older son. It would have sort of made sense in some ways. Aaron was the better talker, and Aaron actually helped out Moses a lot and acted as sort of his microphone and his speaker for him. So this was really important. But we see that right from the beginning, Aaron was happy for Moses. We see from the Torah that Aaron was completely content for Moses to be the leader and Aaron to work for him. And he was not jealous at that point. And I think that's what Moses realized. And when Aaron actually reached out to Moses, according to the Midrash, on the eighth day, saying, "Well, how can I be high priest? You should be high priest. You set up the whole tabernacle. You did it all, Moses." Moses actually supposedly says back to Aaron, "Well, when I was asked over you to rescue the Jewish people, you rejoiced in my status. You rejoiced in the fact that I was sent, and so therefore my heart will rejoice now in you and the fact that you're going to be the leader and the high priest." And I think this is beautiful. Well, what a beautiful relational way to see other people, that even if you live in a world where, you wish you got that position or you wish you got that job, to understand that you want to live in a society where people are actually legitimately happy for each other, and that you can actually remember times previously where people may have been happy for you for your achievements, even though they didn't get it, and that everybody is in different positions. Everyone gets picked for the job sometimes. And it's really a matter of trying to be happy for other people when they get picked, when they get the choice to be the lead, that they get chosen to be the leader, and be happy when you get chosen. And that's wonderful, and rise to the challenge. And that is so, so important. It's such an important part about being the Jewish people, is to see other people's happinesses and other people's joys as our joys. And as long as God's will is being fulfilled in the end, no matter, even if I am upset or disappointed that I didn't get the job, which is valid and real, in the end, that we should come to a place of saying, well, everyone has their opportunity at a certain time. And in the end, what really matters is God achieving God's will and doing God's will. And if God needs this particular person to do that, or sees fit for this particular person to do it, that's wonderful. And that's the way it should be. I think that's a great way in which we can look at that. And if we can, again, see that relationally, especially in the way that others have been there for us in the past, and try to be there in the same way, if we've experienced that, that's absolutely wonderful. And it's a wonderful thing to do. Let's turn to the Rambam on Pesach, the laws of Chametz U'Matzah. We're going to be in the 7th chapter today. And really, in the 7th chapter, Maimonides starts going through things that should be relatively familiar to us, but I think it's nice to see them sort of categorized out and understand really like what are the mitzvot of the Seder night, and what are we trying to accomplish? Obviously, if you sort of read through the Haggadah and follow the directions as a lot of us do, we do fulfill the mitzvot. But it's really nice to actually know like what are the mitzvot, what are we actually supposed to be accomplishing at Korah, and sort of what is the extra stuff. And I think Maimonides does a really good job here in the 7th chapter, sort of cutting through of like what is that and what are the extra stuff, what are the necessary Korah. Well, the most important part of the Seder night is that positive commandment of Torah to relate the miracles and wonders wrought for our ancestors in Egypt on that particular night. Which particular night are we talking about? Is, of course, the 15th of Nisan, right? That night in which we, that particular night in which we went out of Egypt. Now, you could still say, well, that night can be remembered. Maybe it's a commandment to remember that all the time, to remember that the fact that we went out of Egypt all the time, which it is, by the way, a mitzvah to remember all the time that we went out of Egypt. And very, very important. And it actually is important to remember that God brought us out of Egypt most days of the week and every day of the year. But why specifically is there a specific commandment to remember it on the 15th of Nisan, on that specific night? Well, we actually have in the Talmud actually derives it from Exodus 13:8, where it says, that where in the Torah it says, and you should tell your children on this very day, for the sake of this. And what for the sake of this means is Bishashi yesh matzah munachim lefanecha, at the point in which the matzah and the maror, when we're fulfilling those mitzvot of eating the matzah on the 15th night of Nisan, and the maror, and remembering the hardships of Egypt and remembering that moment, that's the exact moment when we should relate the good things that God has done for us in Egypt. And that's why we know that we specifically have a commandment to relate the wonders and the miracles that God did for us in Egypt on the night of the 15th of Nisan. And of course, if you're living in Galut, if you're living outside of Israel, then you also need to read it on the 16th. You also have to do this on the 16th of Nisan as well. And so very, very important for us to tell this, for us to go into this, to do this, to tell this, whether it's to ourselves. And again, all the more you elaborate on this, it doesn't mean you have to go exactly according to the Haggadah. You can go and add to the Haggadah, as many people I know do. And really, the more you add, the better. The more you get into the details and you get into how God saved us, and that you can picture that in a more full way, the better off you are, which is really important. He also continues on in the second halacha and says that this should actually be done in a way that should fit the people surrounding you at the table, right? It should actually fit the people who are actually in front of you. So you should say it in a way that the people are going to understand, right? The language of Maimonides uses a foolish person versus a wise person. Okay, I might not use that like unidirectional language of either you're foolish or wise, but like I think we can interpret that as like all the different kinds of learners. I mean, that's what the whole story of the 4 children is supposed to teach you, is that whatever learner you have in front of you, whatever kind of person, no matter what age they are, there is a way to relate the story and to tell of God's miracles on that night. And it's really up to us to figure out how to do that in a way that is compelling and meaningful to them. Very, very important. And lastly, we're told to actually conduct the Seder and the remembrance in a way that actually pushes people to ask questions. It's we're actually told to do things strange, to eat in different ways and to sit in different ways, right? Famously, that we're supposed to lean over when we're doing the Seder, right? And we're supposed to be doing things that are peculiar, that actually get the people around the table to ask questions. So this is really, really important. And I think this comes to teach us that it's not just the way we talk about the miracles and the way we teach them, but that teaching and talking and communication also happens through the way we even set up the paradigm of the Seder, how we set up the food, how we set up the events. And that's why Sedarim should really be thought about very carefully beforehand of how you set them up in order to fulfill this mitzvah, that everyone around the table can really, truly relate God's miracles and God's goodness in Yetziat Mitzrayim and really feel that in a deep way, because that's the fulfillment of the mitzvah. And it's very sort of rare in Judaism that we actually have a mitzvah to inform ourselves, to tell of God's great miracles and wonders on a particular day, in a particular moment. So how do you actually know that you even internalize that in a real way and actually fulfill the mitzvah? And obviously, I'm sure there is a very much a standard, but I think that hints to us at if understanding is what needs to be reached and knowledge, real knowledge, then that knowledge needs to be taught on everyone's particular level. And we need to use every resource we have to set up the Seder so that it really matches those who are sitting in front of us, whether it's kids, whether it's adults, whether it's certain kinds of learners, whatever it may be. We need to do that work in order to fulfill this mitzvah. Let's now finally turn to Menorat HaMaor. We're going to continue talking about Menorat HaMaor on the miracles of Pesach. And as I hinted, if you listened last episode that was right before Pesach began, that we're going to talk about the plagues today. And we're going to really talk about how the rabbis see the plagues and the function of the plagues. And we talked about the main function of the plagues for the rabbis is sort of prove to Pharaoh in a very personal way that God is really the one in charge, that anybody who thinks they're in charge over anything, they really aren't in charge. And what we see in the plagues is that Pharaoh is that God is going to go one by one to actually really truly systematically prove to Moses, to Pharaoh, that he really is not in charge, that the idea that he's in charge is truly just an illusion. And that even the place where Pharaoh has the most power or thinks he has the most power, God really is in charge. So when we're going to go through the 10 plagues and talk about how this works. So the first plague that happened, of course, is the plague of the Nile River turning into blood from water, right? Turns red. And the reason that this was started out with, because really the Nile River was the source of Pharaoh's power as a god, and the Egyptians really worshipped the Nile River, and the Nile River is really where all the power of Egypt came from. The fact that the Nile River floods and gives life, and really the center of everything in Egypt was around this Nile River valley. And so by turning into blood and showing that even the Nile will rebel against Pharaoh and the Egyptians if God is so inclined, I think really shows very quickly. And it's not even just the waters themselves, right? It's also the things that come out of the water, right? So interestingly enough, it's not just the fact that the water itself turned into blood, but then what comes out of the water is the frogs. The frogs come forth from the Nile and get into everyone's house and destroy everything. So it's not even just the fact that the water itself is powerful and that God has power over the water itself and could turn the water against Egypt, but also what comes out of the Nile, right? The produce of the Nile, that destruction can actually come from the Nile in the form of these really harmful and annoying frogs. So very, very important. Remember, they probably got a lot of their food from the Nile River in terms of fish. So to see these hard or annoying things or bad things come out of the Nile River, that's not good. And then for the third and fourth plague, God actually switches from the waters to the earth and shows that not only in the waters is God in charge, because of course many people thought, well, maybe God is the God of the Nile, right? Or the God of water. And that was usual for gods, that they were a God over a certain place or a certain region. But we know with God is in charge of everything. So all of a sudden God started doing plagues with the earth. In the third plague, right? Famously, the dust turns into lice. And I know this is not how lice comes anymore, or lice actually becomes, but it seems that ancients thought that lice sort of comes and from dust itself. So maybe not completely scientifically accurate, but still trying to tell us that even the dust of the earth that God is in charge of, the earth is God is in charge of. And in the same way as the dust of the earth turning essentially into something destructive, just as the waters of the Nile turned into blood, the dust turned into lice, so too what comes out of the earth and what comes out of the dust is also can be damaging and destructive to the Egyptians if God wants. And that's why we get the fourth plague of the harmful animals, like the wild animals that come out of the dust, the mixed multitude of animals that comes out, right? That is about similar to the frogs that come out of the water, so to the wild animals come out of the land, proving that God too can also cause this destruction from the land itself, and that God is in control not just of the waters but of the land. We're going to keep going through the plagues next time, and we'll see how kind of the whole entire 10 plagues forms sort of a coherent statement of God's authority over everything. Well, that's it for today, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to the Daily Derech. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please feel free to email me anytime at rmr@templeofaaron.org. Thank you so much for listening. There are so many people to thank, and you can look in the show notes for that.
And also, if you want to know and see any of these texts in the original, we actually have that too. You can actually find that in our episode description. So look in each of the episode descriptions and you'll find that information right there. Thank you very much. Have a great day, everybody.